Eva Orlowska. I'm with the Polish-American Chamber of Commerce. Our next company is 13therapeutics. The presenter will be Tom Bruguiere, the CEO. And after the presentation, please, you're welcome to ask questions across the hall in room 611.
Thank you. How do I make it big?
Right there. Enter.
No, I don't think that was it. Okay, now that we've handled our technical problems and we know where we're streaming to, I want to thank you very much for coming to our presentation. I'm Tom Bruguiere. I'm the CEO of 13therapeutics. I assume this late in the conference and with this group, this is a little bit like what a Newt Gingrich rally would look like at this stage in the campaign. But feel free to move up if you need to. 13therapeutics, we are a Portland, Oregon company. We're not from Seattle. We are a spinoff of the Oregon Health and Sciences University in Portland. And we are a drug development company. We have a portfolio of anti-inflammatory, autoimmune disease treating peptides derived from the vaccinia virus. And we are taking those compounds forward for the treatment of a number of different inflammatory and autoimmune diseases that have huge potential and also unmet medical needs. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about that kind of as we go through this here. So our strategy is that we identify inflammatory diseases which are TLR-based, that have large markets, and that have unmet medical needs. Then what we do is we develop and characterize unique peptides which target intracellular signaling pathways of TLRs, which are relevant to each of the various different inflammatory diseases. So it's important to note that what we do is target the inflammatory pathways as opposed to simply targeting individual TLRs. And secondly, to note that different inflammatory diseases involve multiple and sometimes different TLRs. So we have a portfolio of compounds, each of which will have a different mechanism of action and each of which can be used for treating slightly different diseases in different ways. Our strategy is to complete the in vivo preclinical testing of the peptides and then to commercialize the peptides through collaborations with big pharma or by doing in-house development as we go forward. It's important to point out as we get into the presentation, we are primarily an autoimmune inflammation company. I'll talk a little bit about what our first compound and our first disease is, but we are more of a general autoimmune disease company. So the science is that we take viral proteins and we use our internal platform to extract segments of those viral proteins to be used to treat these various diseases. The theory is that, for example, viruses have been around for hundreds of millions of years and they survive by getting into their hosts, damping down the immune system, and living without killing the host. So the idea is take the same mechanism that the viruses are using and turn it around to dampen down an out-of-control immune system in a human being. Our approach then has led to a couple of dozen peptides that we have to date that are in our portfolio. We have 3 that we consider our lead peptides. Our lead peptide we call P13. That's where the 13 from the company comes from, P13. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Our secondary peptides we call P7 and P16. Each of them have unique sequences. Each of them have different mechanisms of action, and each inhibit different subsets of TLRs. So if you look at this slide, we can treat diseases that either have an infection or have no infection. If you see the various diseases here, uveitis, sepsis, influenza with an infection, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, ischemia, TBI, et cetera. In a number of these diseases, we've actually tested in preclinical models and have shown some level of efficacy. And we have chosen to go after, as our first disease with our lead compound, auditory markets, noise-induced hearing loss, age-related hearing loss, and otitis media. We can give topical drops to the outside of the eardrum, which go inside the middle and inner ear, and will prevent and treat noise-induced hearing loss, will lessen and delay age-related hearing loss, and will clear up the fluid that causes the hearing loss in kids that get ear infections and then otitis media. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. Of the lead peptides, this is just a chart that shows a little bit about each of them. They're not big. P13 is 20 amino acids, P7 is 26, P16 is 20. Our other compounds, pardon me, are also small and about this order of magnitude. You can see the mechanism of action where we believe they're actually working to date. And so the various therapeutic applications of these then are P13 will, we believe, inhibit bacterial, viral, and non-infectious induced inflammation for treating things like noise-induced hearing loss and age-related hearing loss. It's also showed efficacy at some level in rheumatoid arthritis as well as in treating systemic inflammation. On the other hand, we think P16 is good at inhibiting gram-negative bacterial and virally induced inflammations for treating things like systemic inflammation, i.e. sepsis, influenza, cytokine storm types of things. And P16 similarly has its own particular characteristics and is good for treating other kinds of diseases as well. So just to give you an idea of the characteristics of the peptides, a little bit about how they work and the fact that they all work a little bit differently. So our lead commercial opportunity, because as you know, as a small company, we get one chance to do something right. And then if we do it right, we get a lot of chances to do things wrong. But if we do it wrong, we don't get any more chances. So we picked a therapeutic area where there are no existing therapeutics, where there are large unmet needs, and we picked a method of administration, topical, where there'd be very little risk of any kind of toxicity. So hearing loss is our first therapeutic area that we're going into, focusing on topical eardrop applications of our lead compound P13 for treating noise-induced hearing loss, both prevention and treatment, age-related hearing loss, delaying the onset, and otitis media. And we've shown efficacy in preclinical animal models in each one of these. So for noise-induced hearing loss, 15% of the people, about 26 million people in the U.S. between the ages of 20 and almost 70 have some level of noise-induced hearing loss. I have a 21-year-old son. He goes to rock concerts. He doesn't wear earplugs. Noise-induced hearing loss potential. Occupational hazards are a big part of noise-induced hearing loss. And obviously military operations can be a big place where people can get noise-induced hearing loss. So it can result from a variety of different kinds of contaminations, and our vision is that P13, our lead compound, could be used topically as both a preventative and a treatment for noise-induced hearing loss, and we've shown that in our models. This is just a little bit of the data showing how P13 protects, that is, if it's given before a noise insult, in animals in a noise-induced hearing loss model. And you can see the red line up there is the control, and the blue line is P13. And you can see the animals that have had in one ear P13 given before the noise insult do much better in that ear than the animals that have had nothing, basically, in their ear. So we think there's a great opportunity here. Again, back to my son, the vision that I can see is you take the earplugs that he should put in his ear, you embed something like P13 in it in a slow releasing kind of form, you send him to the rock concert and you don't worry about it. Obviously in the military, the same kind of thing could be done. Occupational environments that are noisy, the same. We've also shown that we can prevent or preserve hearing with P13 given after the noise insult. So expose the animals to noise in a special chamber, then we take them out and then we give them in one ear, we give them the P13 topically, in the other ear we don't. And you can see the green line is the control, the red line is P13, and you can see that they have less damage from the noise when they are given P13 after the noise insult. There is a therapeutic window. We're still working on exactly what that is, but we think it's on the order of a magnitude of an hour or so. Age-related hearing loss, there are 12 million U.S. adults. There's something like 200 million people around the world with age-related hearing loss. The clinical symptoms, basically, people begin to lose their high-frequency hearing, and that begins to affect speech perceptions. It begins to affect quality of life, et cetera. Large pharma companies love this disease and this application because it's something that once one starts on a therapeutic, they're going to be on the therapeutic for probably the rest of their lives. We think that the idea of putting drops on the outside of the ear once a day, once a week, whatever, is a very lucrative opportunity there. And again, there's no existing therapeutic for treating age-related hearing loss. This shows some of the data that we have. This data, again, the red line is the control, the blue line is P13. This data and the 4 different graphs are different frequencies, 32, 16, 8, and 4 kilohertz. This preclinical model is in mice that are bred to lose their hearing, so they will lose their hearing. Whether you do something or you don't do something, they will lose their hearing, and in a fairly short period of time. This is an experiment that we did over a period of a year, and again, you can see in this very extreme model, P13 delayed the time when they were going to eventually lose their hearing loss, in a model where they were going to lose their hearing loss because of the genetic abnormality. Otitis media. Anyone who has a kid has probably at one point in time taken that child to the doctor with an ear infection. What happens is that you get a cold, starts with a virus. It can turn into a bacteria in the ear that causes fluid. You get pain and swelling. Kids are miserable. We're not trying to treat that pain, that swelling, or the bacterial infection. But what happens and what pediatricians are most concerned about is the kids get fluid in their ears. That fluid affects their hearing, and that hearing effect then delays their development, speech, learning, et cetera. There are 21 million cases just in the U.S. of what they call acute otitis media. You first get that ear infection, you first go in, you have the fluid in your ears. Of those 21 million, more than 4 million go on to a long-term fluid in their ear and potential longer-term hearing loss. And then it's called otitis media with effusion. Of those, a percentage wind up getting ear tubes. I'm sure some parents have dealt with ear tubes in the past. Ear tubes are a $4,000 operation. It's a general anesthetic operation. It's not something you really want your child to have to go through as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old. We can put drops in the ear of that child and we can clear up the fluid. At least we can do it in the animals, and our proposition is that we can do it as well in the children. So our vision then is that P13, our lead compound in this disease, could be used topically again, drops on the ear, with or without antibiotics. We're not trying to treat the infection, we're trying to treat the fluid and the inflammation. As just a standard treatment to resolve the fluid that happens in acute otitis media or that stays around and goes into otitis media with effusion. The idea of, instead of doing a $4,000 operation, you do drops in the ear for $200 is a pretty compelling argument for almost any parent, we believe. You can see in this chart, the cartoon is just a picture of the inside of the ear. The charts that are on the right-hand side of it show the middle ear fluid. So the blue in the top 2 panels is fluid. And on the right-hand side of the top 2 panels, you can see where it's white. That's after treatment with P13, the fluid is gone. The bottom, if you can see the lighter purple band running through the middle of it, that's fluid in the eustachian tube. On the right-hand side of that bottom panel, you can see it's white. That's after P13 treatment, and it's cleared up. Again, charts, the red again is the control, and the blue is P13, and you can see, given P13, not only do they not get the hearing loss to the same degree, it clears up much faster, and in some cases, for some reason, it even seems to make their hearing better than it was when it started in this animal model. So where we are in all of that, with noise-induced hearing loss, like I say, even though we are a general autoimmune inflammatory condition company, we're focusing on hearing as our first disease. For noise-induced hearing loss, we've demonstrated the preclinical efficacy, and I've showed you some of the data using the topical eardrops. We are working with the Army on a grant to begin to study the next phase of it, to begin to study noise bursts, to begin to study other kinds of models in the noise model. For age-related hearing loss, our preclinical data for P13 has demonstrated efficacy in delaying in this severe mouse model the age-related hearing loss. And so we're discussing collaborations with large pharma companies to take that forward. And for otitis media, that's the farthest along of the three. We have completed an FDA pre-IND meeting. We have a very simple tox plan going forward. We're just at the point of initiating the toxicity studies for P13 topically in otitis media, and that tox study would also cover the other acute condition, we believe, of noise-induced hearing loss. So that's where we are with that. Product development-wise, I just mentioned P13 is ready for its IND-enabling studies. We're just initiating those. P7 is in preclinical testing in various disease models. P16 is also ready for preclinical efficacy testing in other acute chronic inflammation models. We're trying to focus as a company initially on acute conditions because the toxicity is just much simpler, and we're trying to minimize risk as we kind of go through this. The other peptides are in various different stages. As I said, we have about 24 different peptides, so all with different mechanisms of action. Actually, if a pharma company came to us and said, do you have a compound that could inhibit TLR2 signaling, we actually could go into our portfolio, we could do some testing, and we could find one that would do that, which we think is a fairly interesting model. The key milestones that we've had along the way, the first was just the development by the scientists at OHSU and who are now inside the company of P13 as a very potent intracellular inhibitor of multiple TLRs, identifying P13 as the best initial candidate to move forward. And then the second key milestone is the formulation milestone that allows P13 to be able to topically go inside through the tympanic membrane, into the middle ear, into the inner ear, and have efficacy in the noise, age-related, and otitis media models. These are huge markets with no existing therapeutics. Around the world, otitis media is about a $5 billion a year market. Noise-induced hearing loss is characterized as a greater than $1 billion a year market. Age-related is probably the biggest because we're all getting older. About a $7 billion a year market around the world. Some say it's even bigger than that. And those are just the initial hearing conditions that we've focused on. Below the line, there are some other things that we haven't had the opportunity to test in yet, but we're interested in. Things like ototoxic drugs. People who have chemotherapy will tend to lose their hearing sometimes from the various chemotherapy drugs. We believe it's possible that we could mediate that hearing loss by, again, giving drops in the ear at the same time that people are taking their chemotherapy drugs. A lot of people want us to test the tinnitus. It's a little more difficult condition. It's not at the top of our list, but it's also a very large market as well. Other commercial opportunities in addition to P13, P7 is an inhibitor of TLR3 and TLR4. We're looking at that for the treatment of various viral-induced inflammation, pulmonary inflammation, et cetera. P16 is an inhibitor of TLR4. We're developing that for the treatment of both acute and chronic bacterial-induced inflammatory diseases, things like cystic fibrosis as an example. And then each of these three compounds, we're also looking at a variety of other chronic diseases in an in vitro, in vivo kind of model. But we're moving the lead compound forward in the hearing models. We have patents that have been issued, patents on P13, both composition of matter and methods of use, patents on P7, patents pending on P16 and the other peptides that are moving along the process there. And then we have some broader patents on peptides derived from the A52R protein and for the treatment of sepsis and some other things as well, and a variety of other things have been filed. Our development plan looks like this. We are kind of in the early stage of that first arrow up there, initiating the IND to tox plan. We have approval from the FDA in otitis media for a 3 subphase, phase 1 test where we have a phase 1A that would be essentially a dosing study, a SAD-MAD study in healthy adults. The phase 1B that would then be just a safety study in healthy adults, and then a phase 1C where we've been given the permission to go into sick children. And at that point in time, we believe we'd be able to get some non-statistical efficacy data from those children. Our general plan, because it's topical, because these are peptides that are just linear peptide bonds, they're very easy to manufacture, they have a low cost of goods, very little likelihood of toxicity, a fairly straightforward plan. It's not an expensive thing, we don't believe, relative to the numbers you hear thrown around in the biotech world. But our plan would say that with the caveat of we don't really know what a phase 2 looks like till we finish a phase 1, that about $13 million takes us through the phase 2 for compounds that could generate $1 billion or more a year in revenue. So just to summarize and see if we have time for any kind of questions at the end. We have a portfolio of over 20 unique novel peptides. They can be used in treating a variety of inflammatory and immune regulatory diseases, and that's our focus, autoimmune inflammatory diseases. Initially, we're seeking approval of P13 as a topical treatment for hearing loss, big markets. We have issued patents. We completed the in vitro, in vivo, and initial tox testing in the hearing models, had the pre-IND meeting for P13. The initial tox studies that we have done have been favorable. Added together, the worldwide hearing loss market is over $15 billion a year, and there are no on-the-market existing therapeutics to treat those things. We believe, conservatively, P13 could generate over $1 billion in sales very easily. Additional assets in P7, P16, and other peptides that we have, low cost of goods, easy to manufacture, and we think a great opportunity. So that's the presentation. I think we can take some questions over in the break room at the end, and thank you very much for hanging in there with us. Say it again.
Speaker, last company. I'm Eva Orlowska with the Polish American Chamber of Commerce, and presenter will take questions in 611 across the hall. Our final company is Bushoot LLC, and the presenter is Brian Finrow, Chief Business Officer.
Thank you. So first off, my apologies. You're getting a second grade presenter this morning. Jackie Heinricher, our founder and CEO, was unable to attend due to last-minute complications at the office, but I'll do my best to fill her shoes. So without any further ado, let me jump in here. So just right off the bat, here's a summary. A lot of people haven't heard of Bushoot. It's a company that's been around for a long time, 15 years, but it's been flying under the radar. But in sum, Bushoot is a platform technology company that's developed a platform technology that allows it to mass produce timber bamboo for the first time in history. Because of this breakthrough, North American, European companies will now have access to a locally grown source of timber and fiber pulp that is estimated to be 40% cheaper, have better, as good or better performance characteristics, and most importantly, that the consumer that buys these products associates with luxury and environmental attributes. And lastly, and most importantly, the technology is not a lab experiment. It's something that is being produced commercially today up in Mount Vernon at the company's lab and greenhouse facilities, and has been validated by large contracts with Fortune 500 companies. So a little bit of history on bamboo, because a lot of people don't understand it. They associate it with what's in their neighbor's backyard and spreading into their backyard. But to see if this is auto visual problems here. Well, okay, we're not going to have the video, but I can show you, show and tell. This is a, yeah, it doesn't work. So this is an example of the timber bamboo we're talking about. It's a lot larger than what you're probably familiar with from your neighbor's backyard. These bamboo grow in the wild in Asia. They're pretty prevalent all throughout China, and they've been used for centuries. In fact, the first paper ever invented, was made out of bamboo. The stuff grows in a different way than trees, most importantly because it's a grass rather than a tree, and so when you cut down a comb like this, the bamboo will regenerate because it has like a grass, it has an underground network of roots. And as long as you don't mow down the whole entire forest of bamboo, which is increasingly common in China, the thing will grow back. The other interesting thing about it, and this is a little bit hard to believe, so you'll have to trust me without the benefit of video evidence, but when these things grow, they will come out of the ground, and if this is going to be 6 or 8 inches thick, it'll come out of the ground 6 or 8 inches thick. And the whole thing will telescope up to its full height, which can be 60 to 100 feet tall, in about 45 days. So it's very different from a tree seedling, which starts out small and gradually over 30 or 40 months will grow and expand and can be harvested 40 or 60 years later. These things you can plant, start harvesting 5 years later, 4 years later, and as long as you do it sustainably and cut things down in strips and leave the root network intact, you can pretty much do that indefinitely up to 120 years, the natural lifespan of these plants. So the number 2 question we get is this going to invade the southeast USA and be a big problem like it is maybe in your backyard if your neighbors planted it? The answer is no. The things you've found in your backyard they've been available since the 70s. They're very aggressive plants, but there are actually 1,200 different species of bamboo. And the ones that are most interesting, the ones that produce these giants, are not invasive. In fact, this is an aerial photo showing an area in southeast United States in South Carolina where the USDA actually planted a test field of mozo bamboo, just like this comb. And you can see the original planting was the red line. It was planted 100 years ago, and the blue line is where it is today. So it's expanded, but not measurably more than a typical forest would, just through its own natural tendencies. So what's interesting about bamboo is, as everybody knows, it grows fast. It grows faster than pretty much any other plant on the planet. Currently, as you can see on this slide here, the race car of the timber world is right here. It's eucalyptus. This is grown in Brazil. They're actually cutting down the rainforest and planting millions of acres of this stuff, and they're turning that into one ingredient in your toilet paper. But what's more interesting for us is that what we think we compete with, this is a very low-grade fiber, a lot cheaper than what you get from a northern softwood, which comes from Canada, which is pulped and turned into NBSK. We've done trials on this, and Mozo bamboo, again, the same species we're talking about right here, which grows very well in the southeast, grows. These are the results we obtained from an actual harvest from this mature grove down in South Carolina with the dotted line up there. This is what we're estimating is an achievable productivity target, and of course you got the error band there. So you can see right away if you're producing these kind of volumes on an annual basis on the same real estate, then you're competing with the same fiber that comes out of this kind of productivity. You can see right away where the economic case can be made. The other samples up here, these are trees that again produce a lower grade fiber, but they're produced and farmed actually actively down in the southeast U.S. There's actually about 30 million acres of pine in the southeast that's planted in plantation style, and overall I think 180 or so million acres of total pine planted in the southeast. So it's a huge opportunity, particularly when you're looking at these kind of productivity increases. So this is a similar slide, similar data presented differently, and this shows you the two things here. First of all, it shows you the massive productivity increase in terms of the volume under the curve here is what's important here. This is the total volume of harvestable material fiber that you're getting out of each planting. And as you can see with timber bamboo, it starts here at 5 years, and you can start harvesting it again as long as you do it sustainably. You can just keep going back to that same grove every year. You can't take all of it, but you can take about a third of it, and it'll grow back and regenerate, and you can do it every year. Unlike these trees, which not only grow slower, but they also require these, you see these jumps here where the stand is being harvested. It's just planted, it sits there for, in some cases, up to 60 years, depending on what kind of tree you're talking about. And then you have to come back with a truck and cut it all down, then go back and hand plant it again and wait for it to grow back and come back another generation later. Okay, and last slide here on this section. This shows you the areas where Mozo bamboo, this one particular species, is, first of all, where it grows naturally. This is China, obviously. And these red areas are areas that were identified by an intergovernmental treaty organization as being climatically identical. So a couple of points to make on this slide. First of all, you can see a huge area in the United States that is well suited to growing Mozo bamboo. And these photos here are actually photos from existing mature stands. They're very small scale, but in some cases have been there 100 years. So we know the thing grows well there. It's not going to be wiped out by the frost or the bugs or anything that naturally occurs down there. Second point, you can see all of the interesting markets in the world have native growing areas for this one species of bamboo. And the last point is this is, again, one species of bamboo. There are actually 1,200. Not all of them are commercially useful. Most of them are not. But many of them are tropical, so they grow well in Brazil, Florida, Central America, and even many of them are true temperate bamboo, so they actually grow well here. In fact, our founder and CEO has dozens of varieties, if not more, growing in her backyard up there in Mount Vernon right now. She just planted them, and they do quite well. Some better than others, but they do quite well here. Okay, so that's bamboo. The opportunity, I think, is probably doesn't really require much explanation. I think everybody's familiar with how commodity prices have behaved in the last 10, 15 years. But suffice it to say, timber is no different. In particular, there are some special drivers that are unique to timber. There's increasing demand, which is mainly coming from the places you would guess, China and the rest of the emerging world. But in fact, Canada is now shipping tons and tons of boats full of just trees to be ground up and turned into all the things that we take for granted that are new to them. But at the same time, there are impacts on supply that are constraining supplies in the U.S. and Canada and the rest of the developed world. In particular, this little critter here is an insect that's been devastating the northern softwood stands up in northern Canada. It just goes in, and you can see it's hard to see on the slide, but it's actually the dark brown is areas that have been just wiped out by this bug. And so there's an interesting phenomenon right now. A lot of this dead timber is being harvested for salvage right now in Canada, but they're expecting in the near term a supply crunch when all of that timber is harvested or rotted out and it isn't coming back. And secondly, perhaps more importantly, the NGOs have gotten really smart about how to apply pressure and put a stop to unsustainable practices like clear cutting. The consumers don't like the idea, and consumer brand companies like this guy's Kleenex owners don't like the idea of their brand being put on top of a clear-cut field and the negative publicity that comes with that. So they're pushing hard and searching for alternative fiber sources, and bamboo is the only near-term solution that stands ready to fill the supply gap. The reason is because it's very similar in all the important respects to the existing supply chain. So the timber has fiber properties that are well suited for creating all of the sorts of consumer products that people know. And most importantly, there are existing supply chains in Asia that are well developed and well characterized, all of the different parameters you need to make good tissue, good paper, good et cetera, out of these bamboo stands. As I mentioned, this is a photo here. Shows a large pulping plant in China, actually built with Western technology, state of the art, all super clean and everything. And the important thing here is there's nothing in this plant that doesn't exist in an American pulp plant down in the southeast or anywhere else in the world. And the other thing is, so it's more than just paper, though. I mean, anything you can imagine wood being made out of, that is made out of, bamboo can go into also, and is actually going into that in Asia right now. And so that includes, pulp and paper, but also, durable goods you see at Fred Meyer. Those are all from China, obviously, clearly well-established production techniques for that. Biofuels is another potential interesting one, particularly biomass energy, which is very big in the southeast, being exported over to Europe right now because of their cap and trade regulations. Textiles and clothing. Food is actually one of the biggest markets, believe it or not. Bamboo shoots are a key ingredient in a lot of Asian cuisines. And so there's a huge market for those in China. Just in China alone, I should say the statistics are difficult to come by, particularly accurate statistics from China, like most statistics from there. But the current market is estimated to be somewhere in the $7 to $10 billion range just for bamboo and bamboo products in China. So it's a huge market there alone. So the question is, it's another video that's not working there. So the question is, well, okay, so if bamboo is so great, it grows so fast, you can use it for so many things, why does nobody but the Chinese and the Japanese and a few other countries around the world, why is nobody using it except them? Well, the answer is a couple of very odd things about this plant. In addition to the odd way in which it grows, it only flowers every 60 to 120 years, depending on the species. But all of them are uniquely bad at reproducing themselves. And so what that means is if it doesn't flower, you don't get seeds. If you can't get seeds, you can't make more little bamboo on any scale. And so the way that they've historically been propagated is through a guy going out into the field with a shovel and digging up a bamboo and cutting it in half, and then laboriously trucking it somewhere else and planting it again and waiting for it to spread, through the underground root network. Then people have been trying for decades to figure out a way to propagate it using scientific techniques in a lab, but for various scientific reasons that I probably couldn't explain and probably don't understand fully, these traditional tissue culture techniques haven't worked well for bamboo. They haven't worked at all. Actually, nobody's been able to do it until this team in Mount Vernon, through dogged enthusiasm over 15 years, figured out how to crack that code. And for the first time now, thanks to Bushute, it is now possible to mass produce commercial quantities of timber bamboo starts at commercially viable prices, and we're talking commercial scales, and we're talking in the millions, and this is going on today. Okay, so this slide shows you a couple of examples of how these things are harvested. Remember, this is already a multi-billion-dollar industry in China. The left photo here is an excerpt from a Chinese company that's traded on the Frankfurt Exchange, and they're bamboo, Asian Bamboo AG, and they're the largest, I think, of the bamboo producers and suppliers. And what they do is they go around to rural villages in China, negotiate with the village leaders to contract to lease the land, because you can't buy land in China, where there are wild growths of mozo bamboo. Then they pay the villagers to go out there with handsaws and things, cut them down, carry them back to the village, put them on trucks and things. That's the state-of-the-art supply chain. And then in the U.S., you've got an example here. You can see these guys here. What they're doing there is cutting down a tall, mature mozo comb like this is from Avery Island down in Louisiana. They trucked it up to Oregon and they've planted it. They've done 2 of these and taken them 4 years, and they hope over time these things will spread and grow, and they'll have a viable mozo plantation up here in Oregon, actually in the Pacific Northwest, which oddly enough is not the best growing location for it. But this is something that now, through Bouchut's technology can be done almost instantaneously. It takes about 200 starts to an acre, and we can produce millions. So you can see right away the opportunities for scale. So the story on how this happened, it really boils down to Jackie Heinricher. There's a photo of her right there in the lab. And you can see there another photo of the greenhouse where the miniature bamboo are being hardened off for shipment. So Jackie started working on this back in the late 90s, just purely out of an interest in the plant. And it was literally, it wasn't a garage story, but it was a barn story because it was talking about Skagit County. It's a rural area. They don't, things start in garages up there. And for the first bamboo was divided. You can see the shovels and a couple of root balls there. They're hand dividing them and reproducing them. And they would sell them to the nursery trade. And that's the historical roots of the company. But over time, of course, she realized that that's not really any way to scale. A lot of people have realized that as well. But rather than giving up like most everybody else has, she's kept with it for 15 years. Teamed up with some other individuals up in Skagit County that have tissue culture expertise. They built up a lab, which is actually still operating. It's still the seat of the company, and eventually cracked the code, figured out the exact precise sequence of nutrients and growth parameters, et cetera, in the lab, and then just as importantly in the greenhouse to take these plants from a petri dish all the way through to a viable plant that can survive out in the wild. And so, as I said, this is a commercial scale operation already. They're real revenues, and we're making real sales. These are projected deliveries, and this is these numbers here. I should emphasize they're not just projections that we came up. Well, it would be nice to sell 3 million of these things next year. It does take a while. They're live creatures that have to be nurtured, and there's a growth cycle to them, despite the fact that it's so much faster than sort of the legacy technology. And so these are based on real projected orders, guidance that we've received from customers that are asking for and demanding these types of deliveries. So it's a real story, and we hope moving in the right direction. The other mark of validation, in addition to just having the revenues and the production on the ground, is that the technology has been recognized by some really world-class companies, and most importantly, our collaboration with Kimberly-Clark Company, which is the owner of Kleenex Tissue and some other brands that everybody knows, has just recently announced this collaboration at the Rio Plus 20 UN Summit down in Rio de Janeiro. Okay, so I won't go into the sales and pricing model, but suffice it to say, when you've got this kind of value-added opportunity, we're trying to be very intelligent about how we go about attacking the market. It is drop-in replaceable, but there is an issue that we have in encouraging adoption because it is new, and particularly because we're selling to a very old and entrenched industry. But the good news is that it's working so far, and we are very enthusiastic about the opportunities that stand in front of us. And so how we're going to accomplish that? Well, this is a pretty basic supply chain. You can see it's at the end of the day, we want to be the Monsanto of the timber world, the timber bamboo world. And so that doesn't mean we're not interested in buying, creating our own pulp mills and creating our own toilet paper brand and things like that. We want to be really focused on what we're good at, which is the science and the IP and the initial production. So as far as protecting that position, we have a very robust intellectual property strategy. We have retained Cooley LLP, actually it's my old law firm, and Eric Weitenheimer in particular, who is one of the preeminent plant biotechnology patent lawyers in the country, to advise us on the patent work. But in particular, I think actually the more robust defense is the trade secret protection we enjoy. All of our processes are highly proprietary and very, very difficult to emulate in another lab. And in addition to that, we also have the warm embrace of the federal government, which prevents all of any competing bamboo from being introduced into the country. So since the early 1900s, it's been illegal to introduce into the U.S. live plants, live grasses, which was set up that way just to protect the U.S. wheat crop and rice and things like that from pathogens and bugs and viruses. But the nice thing about bamboo being a grass, one side benefit is that it's covered by this prohibition. So if somebody does invent this in a country outside the U.S. and want to import it, or if they decide to do it in a country where we haven't spent the money to file our patents, there are other barriers to entry, fortunately for us. Okay, and then just to wrap up, mug shots of our team. I encourage you to take a look at our website. It's an all-star team. Particularly on the research side, we've got expertise from all of the top industry leaders in this field, and then the commercial side is now being built up as well. Don Schlosser, who's in the audience, I believe, and myself, and Scott Paul from Greenpeace are three of the most recent additions to that. Okay, and then finally, just a word outside of what we're talking about, what I've been talking about today, timber bamboo. So the technology is actually, it's a platform technology, and the interesting thing is that it is widely in demand for solving many other problems that agriculture is facing. There's a real problem with certain crops with viral loads and things, decreasing the productivity of seed stock. And so because this operates in a sterile environment, it has real potential to revolutionize not just the timber industry, but many others as well. So in sum, this is how I like to think about it. I think it's what really compelled me to take the offer and leave Cooley and to join this adventure. It's a rare opportunity where you have a massive market opportunity and massive pricing power. You have patent monopoly pricing power times the massive size of the multi-hundred-billion-dollar annual global forestry world is a very, very attractive opportunity in front of the company. Thank you for your time. I will be available next door to answer questions, but happy to talk with anybody in the hall as well. Thank you. I do, yeah. You grow bamboo? Oh, okay. Oh, you do? Are you the same people? No. So did I say anything wrong there? No, no. It's not grown in Washington at any commercial scale yet. Yeah, this stuff will grow here. Actually, Jackie has some in her backyard, but it's not ideal for this climate, and it's a warm weather species. You grow some, yeah? How big is it? 8 feet. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is it the big bamboo? Is it the timber bamboo?
Probably this. This is about 60-70% of what you see in China. Yeah, so we're doing field trials now to identify whether the optimal growing agronomics for it. But it does grow, and nothing thrives under challenging conditions, but it does grow in marginal lands. So our hope would be that I better take this. Our hope would be that people don't do this. I mean, one of our goals is to manage this industry in a way that eucalyptus was not managed, which is to say, it's got this terrible reputation now and getting worse by the year. So. Oh. No. They've been the company's been selling these things commercially. The different the smaller horticultural interest ones. I don't know, maybe over 100. seen the Bassetti?
No, not in the
Bassetti's
northwest.
like, yeah, Bassetti's a local temperate, full temperate. And it's full height, 30, 40 feet anyway.
But in the southeast, it's up over 100
Oh,
feet.
in the southeast.
How far you got your sales are right out of the
We
They
root
haven't been
We root
in the ground long enough
Rooting
to
them.
really tell. 'Cause they'll hit back depending on the weather. Now,
How long in the ground?
there's several different plants. There's some
Oh,
that
you
have
are?
been there that was not
Okay.
done by us
Yeah,
from the
we haven't
1940s.
had any yet.
Those are
Littler things are
150.
bulbs and things like that. Sometimes
But the
featured,
ones that
nothing
have been planted as part of
really.
the test,
I think the
don't know
USDA has done a
exactly
good job of keeping the bugs out.
6 months.
No, well, it's
6
hardier,
months, 9 months,
I
something like that.
suppose.
You don't know.
Yeah.
There's got to be.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not a biologist, but from what I understand, that the key points would be when they first go into the ground, and maybe within the first, when they have a change in the environment, as opposed to once they're in the ground and just growing.
Yeah, I know. I just know. I don't know. I know rhododendrons are very concerned
About
about rhododendrons.
They won't grow as well.
Well, they don't. Yeah, they'll lose the.
Well, I mean that's it's a real thing. I mean it's a monoculture. I mean it is genetically identical. I mean, we're trying to solve that by again developing different strains, but it's almost fundamentally a problem with the plant itself. And until we can figure out how to induce flowering, we won't be able to cross. It's a kind of a problem. Well, at least you could cross and get some genetic diversity.
Yeah, a lot of the seeds, I don't think are fertile.
A lot of them aren't viable at all. Yeah, even when they do.
So you think you can get these things to grow? Because you got to show how you get these things to grow big.
Yeah, but there's no reason they shouldn't. They're
How long
the
will it
same.
take to mature your stuff?
We're doing field trials to determine that. I suspect the answer will be it depends on how good the soil and the water and the nutrients and all the rest of it are. But in general, the data out of